Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to In the Zone. I'm Rich Sutter. I'm with my ride or die, Pete Cowles, and we are here today. It's Thursday, June 22nd, and it's 74 degrees in beautiful Westfield, Massachusetts. We're excited to be here with you today. At first, Pete, when I got ready to do the show and started to prepare for the show, I sat there and I said, "What in the name of good God are we going to talk about this week?" It's such a it's such a time when the NBA ends and basketball goes into this little bit of a plateau, but there's a couple of things that have happened, so it gives us a little bit of time to talk about it. We're going to jump right in with our Feed 'em Fish segment. We didn't have anything up until it walked right into our lap, and Coach Bob
Huge.
Huggins once again finds himself on the bad side of the news. This event was an alcohol related event in Pittsburgh. And as I said to a few of my friends, this is akin to Phil Ford getting caught in Durham, North Carolina. Phil Ford was a famous point guard for North Carolina. And anybody who knows the setup between those two teams knows that Durham and Chapel Hill are literally a stone's throw from each other. 20 minutes. But as a North Carolina point guard, you wouldn't want to be misbehaving in Durham because, as you might say, you might be a plum catch for the Durham police down there who might be Duke fans. So, Bob Huggins in Pittsburgh, same thing. You're the West Virginia head coach. You're in enemy territory. Bunch of stuff going on with Coach. I wish him well personally, but West Virginia has gone ahead and pulled the trigger on this and fired Coach, resigned. Um, I think it was probably the right move at this time, but being as late as it is, their options to find other coaches right now are going to be significantly limited. And so they threw. There are some names, obviously, in this business. Everything happens. The job opens, the carousel will start to spin. Who's next? Who's going to be next after that in that job? And so this one job can create a little bit of a buzz at a time when it's fairly quiet. The difficult thing for West Virginia, confronting West Virginia right now, aside from all the other stuff that's going on, is in selecting the next coach, is A, you have to have a good amount of speed right now. You can't let this drag on because what you need is somebody to go in and talk to your current roster of players, settle them down, let them know that they're going to have a good senior year, let them know that the 1 or 2 years of eligibility they have left are going to be good years. They have a good roster. So the first and primary thing is with speed here. They have to act with speed. Now, that being said, you can't act so quickly that you don't get the right guy because then you're going to be stuck with this person for the next 4 or 5 years. So they're in a little bit of a tight spot. They had Ron Everhart on staff, and I just wanted to allude to that for a second. Coach Everhart is somebody I know. He has a DeMatha background, Washington, D.C. Background, and he had been a head coach at Northeastern out here in the state of Massachusetts, also had been the head coach at the University of Duquesne in Pittsburgh. So I thought, at least in the bind that they were in a little bit, that they would try and seek an interim solution to this where they would ride out the year. Um, but I don't know that that would be amenable to the current roster as well, because with all of the rules right now, they're in danger of losing quite a few of their players. They're in danger of
Do you
other
think they'd
people
portal out of there?
stepping in. Right now, their phones probably are ringing off the hook as we talk right now. And so it's important for West Virginia to exhibit some stability here, although I think that's going to be difficult in June because most coaches aren't going to bounce on their current program and go into a program that's currently in turmoil. Now, when you talk about Coach Huggins, it's a very, very bit of a sad story, a little bit of a tragic story to me personally, because I think coaching basketball is such an honor and such a gift, and to do it for millions of dollars is even a greater gift, and certainly something that should be recognized, valued, and appreciated, I think. And in that frame, like I said, life has inherent penalty, life has inherent reward. I think that lack of appreciation for what was actually going on with Coach Huggins might be the final penalty of all time. I see that he's lost his job. Maybe he can come back and get another one. I don't really know. But the other piece of it that I wanted to talk about also Pete, was if you go onto a West Virginia's website right now, the University of West Virginia has an athletics website. If you go onto their website right now, you're going to find 7, 8, 9 people that are under Coach Huggins' name, that are employed by Coach Huggins, who now have had their life disrupted in a really, really upsetting way, where it's even difficult for them to go find jobs right now because most of the jobs in this business are filled. It's not like you're at the University of West Virginia and now you can jump into Indiana's staff because they have an opening. At this time, there's not a lot of openings, and when you have all of those people underneath you, you're responsible for a lot of lives.
Do you think that the coaches, West Virginia would keep the coaches on for some stability?
That's going to be, usually that's the determination of the new coach. If they move ahead right now and find a new coach, I think that's a good call on your part, Pete, that they would talk to the new coach and say, hey, let's just kind of move through this gently and swiftly rather than blasting out the whole staff. Let's find some people that you think you can work with, some people that have good proximity to our current players and have good relationships with our current players, because that's what it really comes down to. The players develop relationships. The players come to rely on the assistant coaches much more than they rely on the head coach. And so those things are personal. The assistant coach is generally on the floor doing most of the recruiting. So they meet in the high school hallway, and then they go all the way up to the graduation generally of the young man from college, and that's a great process. And the assistant coaches, their position is often overlooked there. But at the same time, now it might behoove West Virginia to kind of play on that emotion just a little bit and say to the new coach coming in, I want to ensure that we have some stability. I want to ensure that we have some transferability of the old program, and then they can go ahead and pick through the staff that's there now. Look at all those names there. I mean,
that's the support and the assistant coaches. Yeah,
those are assistant coaches, support staff, director of basketball operations, head coach's assistant, all sorts of different names there. Now, when the new coach comes in, if you were the new coach and you didn't know those people, although that's probably rare in this business, they'll probably know each other, but don't have necessarily a working relationship. If you were the new coach coming in, would you want to keep all of those people around when you really want to hit the ground running and do a good job with your own people? And so many, many times that's often deferred to the head coach about how he wants to proceed. And I think, the mix you threw in there, though, might not be a bad suggestion for the head coach. Go through this slowly, work through it, because it's very emotional for the players as well. People don't really give a lot of credence to that. This is emotional for the players. They just lost their head coach. They just lost the number one figure in West Virginia basketball. This is something that's going to be damaging to the university, something that's damaging to the reputation of West Virginia athletics, something that's damaging to the West Virginia basketball program. Now, the next steps will ensure whether you can smoothly transition and keep this thing rolling at a pretty good pace, or now you're going to suffer the consequence of the action, and you're going to have trouble recruiting. You're going to have trouble getting players to come there. Even with good NIL deals, you'll be losing good players because they just don't want to be in that program.
Hey, Coach, here's an interesting wrinkle. The first assistant head coach coached at Duquesne as a head coach.
Right. That's the gentleman I just talked about.
Yeah,
Ron
Everhart.
He was the head coach at, does it show what his
Duquesne,
record is
Northeastern.
there? Can you slide down and show what his career record was at Duquesne and Northeastern?
He one that wanted to finish.
I'm going to say that his overall record at both Northeastern and Duquesne were not terrible. And the reason for his moving on from there, he left Northeastern to go to Duquesne under fairly good circumstances. I think his Northeastern teams were pretty good. And then moving to Duquesne wasn't terrible over there either. So I would guarantee you that his one-loss record is not terrible at all. And that's what I thought they would do. That's the gentleman I thought they'd turn to right now and just say, okay, he's got head coaching experience. Let's give him a shot. And he's got good connection to the players. And to be honest with you, where they are right now, let's talk some of the names that they might be talking to right now. The name that was first thrown out was a gentleman by the name of Andy Kennedy from the University of Alabama, Birmingham. If you looked on Andy Kennedy's Twitter feed, you saw kind of cryptically him saying, "I'm not interested," and that he was staying at UAB because that's disruptive to the UAB program as well. Now their players are hearing, "Oh my God, we're going to lose our coach. Oh my God," all the assistant coaches are now thinking, "Oh my God, am I moving to West Virginia? Is coach going to take me with him?" So there's a whole lot of emotion that goes in that as well. I think they're going to have a difficult time right now, and maybe the default position is Everhart. Maybe they've decided that they're not going to go that way, but here's a couple of names that I would be talking to if I was them. Right now, I would not try and have a home run. I wouldn't try and find a Rick Pitino. A John Beeline's name was thrown around there. I probably wouldn't try and hit a home run name right now. I want stability. I want a good basketball coach in there. So I think Travis Ford, who's at St. Louis, would be a really good person for them to speak to. Mark Schmidt from my alma mater, St. Bonaventure, has done tremendous, tremendous things. I would hate to see him go at St. Bonaventure because he's done great things for us. And I think he's the right man to take us through a little bit of the difficult pasture that we're heading into. But West Virginia would do really well because he's a good X's and O man on the sideline. And the recruiting at St. Bonaventure has been way, way above average for a Atlantic 10 team, if you ask my opinion on that. I think Schmidt would be a good talk to for them. I'd like to see them talk to James Jones, who's the head coach at Yale. I think in the situation that you were in, where you have some personality and reputational damage going on at the university right now, if you select somebody that has tremendous class, dignity, and is associated with a program like Yale, I think that's not a bad move for them right now. He's done tremendous job at his level where he's been, and so that's how I like to do it. I like to see them move up. I like to see them be promoted after doing a real good job. His brother, James Jones, Joe Jones over at BU, is another good choice. But right now, I think West Virginia, just my advice, don't try and hit one out of the park right here. Get a really good basketball coach. You have a good roster, but don't dismiss some of the tumult that's going on in and around your program right now with what has happened.
Well, and that's started months ago, right? With the first incident.
It did.
Yeah.
100%. And now you're in phase 2, and they thought they dodged the bullet, and now you come out in June. The NBA players that might be on West Virginia's team right now trying to get drafted, there's a whole set of circumstances here that are all now on a different playing field in a different place. And when you make this decision, if I was them, I wouldn't try and go big here. I would try and be smooth. I'd try and get somebody that adds class, dignity, and restores your reputation a little bit. So I think any of those names that we threw out there would be really good names to talk to. Chris Mooney would be another great name to talk to from Richmond, but he's had some health concerns as of recently. I'm not even sure he'll be back to Richmond. Haven't really heard much on that front, but he's another really good basketball coach who's done well on the mid-major level and could easily step up to another step. You might see some surprising names here because West Virginia compensates their employees very well. West Virginia has a really good deal there. I'm assuming they have a strong NIL deal. Their compensation package for the coach is probably in the $3 to $5 million range. You have a basketball camp. You have a TV show. You have a contract probably from a sneaker company and some other things like that. So you have a tremendous asset portfolio there if you're West Virginia. The question is, can you get somebody to bite on it right now? So also tonight, Pete, is another exciting night in basketball, especially for me, because the NBA draft takes place tonight. 22nd, you're going to have a number of people whose dreams come true. It's really, really an exciting event. It's an exciting time to watch those dreams come true. And of course, there's a flip side to everything. The dichotomy of it is that there's some young men that are sitting in that room tonight and they're anticipating going higher than they're going to go. And they have to be sitting on national television with people looking, watching and seeing them not be drafted and watching their draft position slip. Each position that you slip, you got your money thing there, Pete, where we do the register. calculation? You got that little thing there? Okay. Every single time you slip in the draft, this is what it's all about. They're slotted in 1, 2, 3. They're going to get certain amount of contracts, certain amount of money. Then as you move down through the draft there, every single slot that you move, every single place that you move down into the draft, you have to look at the millions of dollars that can be lost and hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be lost just on your draft position. Move from 6 to 13 and see what happens. That's significant. And so I looked at a couple of mock drafts that they had out recently. Some of them pretty good. Some of them are very, very different than ours. And I like that. I think ours is pretty good. And I'm interested to see tonight how the NBA executives, how the NBA general managers go about their business. But before we get into the piece of the draft, I got a little bit of a segment for the draft today that we say too high and too low. All right, these are the too high people are the people that we think are a little bit overrated, and some of the mock draft and some of the bandied about communication about them says they're going to be drafted in X amount of position. We think those gentlemen are too high. We're going to list about 5 or 6 of those gentlemen for you that we think are too high. Then we're going to give you our too low list. We're going to give you about 4 or 5, 6 gentlemen on this list that we think you don't have in the right position in terms of this NBA draft. And if they go that way, then it's going to be an interesting night, especially with when you watch, as I said, somebody will draft somebody that the team below them was going to draft. That starts a whole lot of different machinations going on in that war room about, okay, what do we do next? Who did we have up next on our board? The second piece of it is they've had some trades already, and there will continue to be trades throughout the night where people are improving their draft position, moving players around the table, and trying to improve their team with free agents or other players that are out in the league rather than go into the draft. And again, if they can pick up a player and move them into the draft and move themselves into the draft in a good position, well, then you consider it to be a good trade. I'm going to give you one here, and there's so many conspiracy theories that float out around the NBA. I'm going to give you a conspiracy theory that people can chew on a little bit. Let's see if they like this one, because on this level, I'm saying right now that some of the teams that are in the bottom of the NBA are having garage sales right now, and to the benefit of the top teams in the league so that the better players are moving into the better places in the league.
Is that for 2 reasons? Because they want to get rid of the contracts and these players want to get to a better place?
So, yes and yes.
Okay.
The team is looking like, if you're the Wizards, we talked about Will Dawkins, their brand new general manager. They're dumping everybody.
All right. Shall we put this slide up? There's the proposed trade.
Yep. And so that's what I wanted to walk through with everybody right now, because it's a 3-team deal. And it involves a couple of different moving parts, and so that's the piece I wanted to look at it, okay? This, if you're a Boston Celtics fan and you're a Brad Stevens fan, this is an absolute stick-up. This is an absolute sweetheart
Wait a minute, is this a
deal.
Danny Ainge move?
This is as good as Ainge ever pulled off right here, in my opinion, because of what they need, okay?
Yeah?
Let me just explain it, okay? They are in a situation where they needed a point guard. Kristaps Porzingis is not a point guard. He's not going to play the point. Now, this leads me to believe, if you want to hear some inside Boston conspiracy theory, that possibly Jaylen Brown or Tatum are not safe in Boston. That there may possibly be something
a draft night
going on, maybe tonight, maybe later on, where there's going to be some movement. Because if you look at a lineup where you have Porzingis, you have Tatum, and you have Jaylen Brown, they're all pretty similar players. Now, maybe that's the move. Maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe that's how they want to build this lineup out. And then what they did also was they traded draft picks. Remember, we talked about last week, the Celtics didn't have a first-round draft pick and only drafted in the second round. I want to say it was 38th.
It's 35th, it says.
36. Okay.
35 pick in 2023.
35. Okay, so here's what happened. The Celtics are receiving and acquiring Kristaps Porzingis. They swapped their draft pick and then now have the number 25 pick, which is a first-round pick in the draft,
Correct.
tonight. And they also pick up a 2024 conditional first-round pick. And that pick is from the Golden State Warriors that the Grizzlies had, and it's contingent upon the Warriors not being in the top 4 picks of that draft, which notably how the Warriors have played from year to year, they're not going to be they're not even going to be in the draft
It's not going to
lottery.
be in contention, right?
Right. So that's a pretty safe number 1 draft pickup in the following year. So there's a little bit of Danny Ainge for you where you're acquiring some draft picks into the future. But Kristaps Porzingis is one of the best players that was out there and available. So when you do this, we're going to have to also talk about what does this do to the Wizards as well. The Grizzlies receive Marcus Smart. Not a bad deal for them. If that's what you were looking for and if that's what you wanted.
If that's that piece that you needed.
Yeah, and Marcus Smart had a great year for the Celtics. He had probably, if you look at it, if you said Tatum, Brown, 1, 2, their third best player all year was probably Marcus Smart. He's turned himself into a serviceable shooter. He's tough. He defends very, very well. And so I could see why the Celtics wanted to move from him because he's not a point guard. And by moving him back into his natural spot, which is the off-guard slot, that's where they have Brown. That's where they have all of those other pieces, Brown, Tatum, now Porzingis. So there's really no room for him there. And so what they did was they forced a square peg into the hole with him a little bit. He did okay with the role, but I don't think he's a good point guard. And so I think this move, I don't know that they couldn't have gotten somebody that I like in the 38th pick, but I think moving up to 25 certainly helps them. Now, the Grizzlies now receive Marcus Smart. The Wizards, we have to go back 2 days ago because the Wizards also traded Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns with Durant and Booker and all of that talent. And that's another conversation that stems out from this. Are they planning on keeping all of those players, or they have a trade planned for something tonight? Because when you have Durant, Beal and Booker are very, very similar players. But Beal is very talented, really, really an up-level scorer in the NBA. So is Booker. Maybe they're just looking to get that going on either side of the wings. But if you're looking at the Denver model, you better go for depth, rather than try and pick up one guy. And I think that's what the Celtics might be trying to do here.
Yeah.
So again, the Wizards are going to get Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, who's been bounced around a little bit, Mike Muscala from Bucknell, and they're going to get the number 35 pick, which was the Celtics pick. Now, if anybody can tell me, other than Tyus Jones on that list, and plus swapping the picks, this is where my conspiracy theory arose from. What did the Wizards get here? Other than...
Unless they're planning on dealing with more bodies, right?
And we'll have to see the next chapter.
Yeah.
But other than they cleared out a ton of cap room, which leads me to say, okay, there could be another chapter here. There could be another shoe to fall. They might be able to now pick up some really good players because they have all this money to spend. I don't know who wants to jump in with the Wizards right now because their best player is Kyle Kuzma. Their second best player is Corey Kispert. And I don't think anybody thinks that you can build an NBA franchise when you compare the Denver Nuggets roster to their roster. And so maybe they just figured this was an attempt to take 2 players and maybe try and make 6 out of it because their roster is really, really bad. I like Kuzma. He's a 17-point scorer, but you just gave up 33 points for nothing. You got nothing in return. You didn't even improve your draft position into the draft. Now, if I was thinking Bradley Beal, I would say, wow, we could trade him to somebody who has a really good draft pick, and you might be able to get Scoot Henderson, or somebody really exciting, one of the Thompson twins there.
Yeah.
And a little shout out to Jay Billis on this one as well. I heard him on his draft analysis over the over the weekend referred to the '80s band, the Thompson Twins, as a middle of the road band. And Jay, I don't know what you were doing in the '80s. I think you were probably in high school somewhere. But the Thompson Twins were a real deal, man. And don't ever knock the Thompson Twins, because In the Zone will have to come after you, Jay. All right. And I like both Thompson Twins as future pros as well. Not sure where, not sure how, but I think that's a pretty good look going in. Right now, if you look at the snapshot of tonight's NBA draft, what you're noticing is that it's filled with players that didn't play in the NCAA. It's filled with players that are international players, and that's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops. In the Zone, I want to shift gears right now, Pete. I know what I'm doing right now is part of certainly a legacy. When you get on the microphone and you talk about basketball, you have to bring up Dick Vitale in that vein, because he's probably the godfather of the microphone. Really, really wonderful as ambassador to basketball, and got a little bit of bad news because he had been battling some throat issues. Recently had got good news that he had been through the protocols and really, really did well with everything. And then just recently caught some bad news from the doctors as well, that he'll need 2 additional surgeries this summer. And we just, In the Zone, our thoughts and prayers out to Dickie V. He is a true ambassador of basketball, somebody that brought a little something special to the game. And I hope he's okay, and I hope he recovers and gets back on the sidelines very, very quickly. But Dickie V, we're giving our thoughts and our prayers to you from In the Zone. Okay, we went through the West Virginia piece pretty good. Back to the Wizards a little bit. They have Wes Unseld Jr. His father was one of the great Wizards of all time. He was famous for an outlet pass that he could throw over his head. 2-hand outlet pass, 2 hands over his head. He could throw it 94 feet in the air. He was an incredibly strong man, maybe about 6'7", not like in today's modern large-bodied NBA center. But he was a really, really big, strong guy and moved around really well. Excuse me. Wes's son has been the coach of the Wizards for a while right now, 35 and 47. I don't say that in order to say, hey, the Wizards ought to look at some of that as well and find a really strong coach that they can get in there, because they haven't provided any talent for this young man at all to see exactly how good of a coach he can be, because right now we're looking at a team that's absolutely been decimated. I'll wait for their next move, but I don't really excuse me, I don't think it's that serious a thing where they're going to have to look at their coach. I think you rebuild the roster first, see how that turns out. But I think the Wizards are in for a very, very long period of irrelevancy in the NBA unless things change quickly. And when things get bad in the NBA, things can get really, really bad. If you go out there with a team that's completely mismatched against the rest of the NBA, and right now their current roster is significantly mismatched against the rest of the NBA, you have absolutely opened yourself up to record-setting lows possibly next year. And looking at a team that's going to be historical for all the wrong reasons. And so getting rid of these 2 players, I get it. But like I said, we're going to watch and see what happens in the next move. So I had a couple of pieces that I wanted to add in here. I'm going to put up a piece of advice for everybody that's in the transfer portal. And one of the things that's important when you're in a transfer portal, as I said before, a lot of times it's a portal, yes, but it's also an elevator. It's an elevator that goes up. It's an elevator that goes down. And one of the things that you really, really got to be careful about, because what happens is no matter what you do, post-COVID now especially, because that changed things a little bit, but you only have 4 years, no matter how you slice it, and no matter the different freedoms that you have right now, those freedoms aren't always designed to ensure that now you're going to have a great experience. And when you have people bumping around from school to school, what you're going to see a lot of times is these school records that have been set years and years ago based on 4 years of participation are now going to be solidified in gold, because many of these gentlemen are moving around at such a rapid pace that you're not going to be able to figure out, a place to stay for 4 years where you can have an unbelievable career, especially when the money is at the top. because there's no NIL money in the mid majors. Okay, very few that I know of that have been able to get that together, or that the school wants to participate in that as well. Down at the lower ranks, Manhattan College, LIU, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, those schools, absolutely no NIL deal. Now, that doesn't preclude somebody from working hard down there and maybe getting a deal, but if you get a deal and you have $1 million on the table from Kansas, and St. Francis Loretto of Pennsylvania finds a donor, comes up with a big heeled donor and says, we got $1 million for you too, you'd still pick Kansas every day of the week because of their TV contract, the level of competition, and those things. So the NIL really is this imbalancer that's going to create it. But here's my advice to everybody that's in the portal. If you want to know that you're on to the right thing, okay, the new school that you find, you have to be able to average 10-plus points there. That's how you know you'll be able to move into a really good situation. Now, that might mean going down, because let's say you're at Manhattan College and you averaged 8 points a game, but somebody's talking to you about transferring in. Maybe you're getting an NIL deal, but you're certainly not going to be playing the amount of minutes that you're playing at Manhattan College. And so you're a piece, and what that means is we don't really need you to be a big piece. We need you to be a small piece.
Right.
We need you to be a piece of the mosaic. And that's something that you really have to give consideration to. But in terms of when you have these careers, you know, you look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, went to UCLA for 4 years, scored all of these points, all of these rebounds. That's going to be a thing of the past, and that's going to be something that I think is going to be missing, and I think that's problematic moving forward. I've said this before. I want to say it again. I want to sound the alarm on this. You're paying players $2 million a year. You're paying players $1 million a year now on NIL deals. What is going to stop the player from gambling on his own games?
They're talking about that with the NBA in general.
What is going to stop the player from triangulating that out through his roommate, through his other people that are in his dormitory or in his residence hall? What's going to stop that? I don't have the answer for that. I don't know if they considered that when they opened this door. This is a Pandora's box, I can tell you that. No question. All right, draft tonight. So exciting. I'm going to be there. I'm going to have the in-zone draft ready. This is what we picked. This is what we selected. And then we're going to have the actual NBA selections that are made. And we're going to put them out next week, and we're really going to do some comparison to see how we did. A couple of mock drafts were funny a little bit because they also had like some things that we thought, Pete, that you touched on.
Here's one I pulled from NBADraft.net.
Right. And some of the things that you touched on, there was a couple of them that fell in that pursuit as well, like Noah Clowney from Alabama being drafted 21 by the Brooklyn Nets because Noah Clowney's from Brooklyn.
See, they got him at 20.
They have him at 20, yeah, and that's one of those instances. Okay, so you might be the Nets, and you think that you're going to take Clowney, and then the Houston Rockets grab him right before you do, and now you got to scramble, and you got to go for your next best available. And that's when you can see a young man also get stuck in his seat, where they thought, okay, he's going to be the number 7, number 8 pick. And one of the reasons he's in that seat is because NBA people were telling him that he's going to be a 7-8 pick. But all of a sudden...
You mean an agent was telling him he's going to be a 7-8 pick?
And then you get into it, though, and all of a sudden you watch, and you're going to see it tonight. And we'll talk about this next week. Who are the players that slipped? Who are the players that were told, hey, you're in a 7-8 slot, and then when they wound up in a 22 slot? It's going to happen.
I think next year we should have a live draft party. Sit here in the studio and watch the draft and just comment on it as we go.
That would be awesome. I think that'd be great. And one of the things too is maybe next year I'll get to New York if they keep doing it in New York, and I'll get down there live. And we can maybe do something from down there.
Sure.
Because that would be really special. I've been at the draft. I've had 3 of my players that I've coached drafted in the NBA. They were lottery picks, which meant I didn't have to stick around that long also to watch everybody else. But also the fact that I was actually in attendance for one of them, and it's truly, truly special. It's truly, truly special to watch them go up on the stage, put the hat on, and it's really, really To be that close in proximity to watch a family whose dreams just came true, there's something so powerful about it. There's something so exhilarating about it. And to have been just a little piece of that at different times, it's rewarding and it's unbelievable. And so the amount of talent that they have that's in the draft right now is significant. I would rate the entire draft tonight, though. I know they love Victor Wembanyama. But they're the same guys last year who loved Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren was drafted second overall in the NBA draft last year, and he is 7'4", like 175 pounds, soaking wet maybe. I implored NBA people. I went out and on different social media sites and said Holmgren is definitely not a number 2. Played 0 games in the NBA. So if you want a metric, if you want to know how well your draft pick did, if you drafted somebody number 2 overall and that player played 0 games this year because of injury, that was, to me, foreseeable and predictable, then you didn't do too good in your draft. And like we did with the coaching hires, what we'll do as well is I'll go through it, the actual draft tonight, and we'll assign some grades. We'll assign some grades to the team. We'll assign some grades to the individual picks, because there's several teams right now that have several number 1s. And there's a couple of teams that have maybe 4 or 5 total draft picks. So I don't know the current situation of everybody's roster, but to have 5 picks probably isn't great, because you probably don't have 5 roster spots. And so you might see somebody with a multiple number of picks look to wheel that tonight, look to make that good trade tonight where they can get off and they can go and say, man, we're going to move up 5, 6 spots and get the guy that we actually really want. It's a little bit of it is draft insurance. You have those 2 picks that are way, way back. And we've talked about the Joker and his being a 42nd pick overall. That doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. Mm-hmm. And that's where, if you look at Denver's build on this team, by grabbing Jokic in the 42 spot. In the NBA draft, I love Jamal Murray. I don't know how many other people were that high on him. He turned out to be an unbelievable NBA player. They have 2 guys on that team, both Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter, that if Michael Porter was on a different team, he would be scoring many, many more points than he does for Denver. But he also got himself a championship ring by being in that role that he's in. But then go to the other guy, Aaron Gordon. He'd start for half of the NBA teams that are out there right now. And so he's on the bench coming off for Denver. That's how you build that depth. And so the other teams that are in the NBA, you're looking up at Denver right now. You're looking up at a bunch of general managers who said, we took one of the best players in the NBA, 42nd pick overall. We took Jamal Murray when people didn't think of highly as him as he was. And if you look at their roster and you look at how that was assembled, they did really, really well with their assessments. That's what's going to matter tonight. Victor Wembanyama to the Spurs is a yawner by now. Everybody knows it's predetermined. There's no big mystery there. There's no big intrigue. But then everything else is up for grabs tonight. Everything else is up for move. All right? So we're going to give you the 2 high list first. All right? This is who we're talking about, players that are on mock drafts, people that are been at the combine, people that have been around the block a little bit. And they have perched themselves into these positions that we think are just too high. Now, how can you get caught up in our too high list? There's a couple of criteria, just so people don't think we were willy-nilly about this when we upset the UConn Husky fans because we don't think Jordan Hawkins is as high as he is. Okay? Here's how we did it. Number 1, how much time have you spent in the NCAA or in a pro league or playing in that organized frame? If you're a freshman and you're coming out, it's not that we want to have any kind of a bell curve on this and stuff, but you just didn't have a great opportunity to prove it. And so now you move in and you say, well, we won the national championship at UConn. I said, well, there's like 5 really, really good players on that team too. And so for him to be able to get open and do that stuff was one thing. But I just don't, but the criteria that we went through just to stay strong on that is you got to have an NBA ready body. You have to have spent significant time in the NCAA and proven some stuff and or in a pro league. And you have to have a high skill level. We looked at everybody's three-point shooting level because everybody wants to be a three-point shooter. If you're going to have a system that employs a lot of three-point shots, if you look at the NBA right now, their number of three-point shots in relation to the rest of their shots is almost 50% now. Teams are shooting 35, 40, 45 threes a game, meaning everybody's shooting them. And so I think if that's the model, don't fight it, play with it, move with it, create within it. And that's what the Warriors' success has been over the years, in that they said everybody except for possibly one guy has to be able to shoot the ball from the outside. Everybody has to have, if you want to talk Moneyball, everybody's got to be in the 38% range with three-point shooting. You have to be in the 45% range with your two-point shooting, and you need to be in the 80%, 75 to 80% range with your free throw shooting. There's a reason they call them free throws. And so you look at some of the big men that are in the league with a 50% percentage. Don't draft him unless he's Shaquille O'Neal. Don't draft him unless he is an absolute dominant player in some other fashion, because over the course of the season, you're going to be watching miss after miss after miss in critical junctures of the game that equate to turnovers. You get 0 points for that possession. And so you're looking at a situation where, again, let's go through it. Moneyball for basketball. You want to have a 38 or better percentage from three-point range. If you're over 40, I love it. Then you want to be able to have an NBA-ready body. Are you big? Are you strong? Can you take the knocking around? That's why we have the knock on Victor Wembanyama, and we don't have a knock on Scoot Henderson, because he's a tremendous, tremendous athlete. And Wembanyama's an athlete too, but he's very, very thin. And the rigors and the battles that go on in the NBA, I mean, I'm excited to see how he does. But right now, from what I've seen, from what I've watched, I'm not sold on him as the franchise that everybody thinks he is. So, but again, he puts up those kind of numbers that I'm talking about right now. He shoots the three ball at a high percentage. He shoots his twos at a high percentage. And when he gets to the line, he's automatic. So on that level, he's really, really solid. That might give him an edge over somebody like Scoot Henderson, who doesn't quite shoot it as well. So we want to have that high skill level as well. And so here's the guys we think are too high. All right. Everybody likes this young man. He was a freshman out of Houston. They had a tremendous year. He played a great deal into that year, but I think his teammate, Marcus Sasser, had a whole lot more to do with it than this young man. Now, again, he does have an NBA body. He does fit in and look ready, but I don't know what position he plays, and if I don't know what position he plays, I don't think he's going to fit in well. I'm assuming they have him slated as a four-man. Jarace Walker from Houston, 6'9". He's mobile. He can run. He can jump. He can dunk. But again, if we go to our criteria of being able to shoot the basketball, there's a lot of other guys in this draft that you could pick that are going to shoot the ball a little bit better than him. So I think he's a little too high. And he's one of those guys that's too high, because he's too high, way, way too high. You know, they have him in the top 5, and I don't have him anywhere near there. And that's just based upon him having, one of the criteria. Now, his 2-point percentages were unbelievable, because in college, most of the times he's at the rim getting dunks. Is that going to occur in the NBA? Once that's taken away from a player, that's what I worry a little bit about Adamo Sanogo as well, or Adem Bona, another big man out of UCLA. Once their offensive game is known that they're not an offensive threat, now you become one-dimensional. Now you become a different type of player. And I think that could easily happen with Jarace Walker. I don't see him as a 5-man, and I don't see him being skilled enough to guard a Jason Tatum, or some of the other great players that he's going to run into. So I think way, way too high on that. I'm way, way too high on Cam Whitmore from Villanova. I think he has some good athleticism. I don't know if his frame is NBA ready. And I think he could have spent another year at Villanova and maybe improved his draft position. But people are telling him he's in the 6 and 7 slot. And so maybe somebody's slated to take him there. I think that's way, way too high. Number 3 on the way too high list, and I'm going to put my reputation a little bit on this, is that Grady Dick from Kansas is way too high. Way too high for him to be listed 11, 12th pick overall. I don't even have him in the first round, to be honest with you. Physically, he's going to have a difficult time in the NBA. He is an elite shooter, though, of the basketball. So we're talking about somebody who would be in that Moneyball frame. Yes, he can do all of those things. But like what you found out with some of the Moneyball players that the Miami Heat have, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, they have some of those guys who can really flat out shoot at the ball. They are an absolute detriment on the defensive end, and Denver Nuggets took advantage of that. And so Grady Dick on the defensive end of the basketball, I don't know who he's going to cover in the NBA. And I think what happens also is you become a little bit of a target. I don't think he's as good as Ben Braun, the young man that's on the Nuggets right now that came out of Kansas as well. And I don't even think he's as good as the guard that's coming out of Kansas as well. That's later in this draft as well. I think you draft him well before Grady Dick. Brandon Podziemski, Santa Clara, very skilled player, passes the ball well. If you were in a Y league or you were in a summer league or something like this, you want this guy on your team because he does so many things really, really well. I just see him getting blown away athletically in the NBA. I don't see him being able to match up with the game out there, the speed of the game, the athleticism of the game. People have him somewhere in the 20 to 15 range. I think that's way too high. I don't even have him in the first round. I think there's players out there like Leonard Miller. Not being listed over Brandon Podziemski is crazy. Leonard Miller not being listed over Grady Dick is crazy. I think Leonard Miller has a huge upside in the NBA. I think he's going to be a really good player in the NBA. But I think also you're talking about Derek Lively from Duke. I'm taking Derek Lively from Duke, who's also a little bit thin on the thin side, but his shot blocking ability is tremendous. And here's something that I wanted to throw out to our in the zone people as well. I personally have experienced this, so I can speak about it, and it's the absolute truth. Okay, years ago they had a center who was 7'4" and maybe 200 pounds. I'm not sure exactly how much he weighed. His name was Ralph Sampson. Played at the University of Virginia, went on in the pros for many, many years, but Mr. Sampson was a legit 7'4", and he was what you would refer to as on the thin side. He certainly wasn't Shaquille O'Neal. He wasn't Wilt Chamberlain. He was more like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar type center where he was much, much thinner, okay? But then we went down, and him and I worked at the University of Virginia's camp where he was. I got to play with the young man, and that was something else. I mean, he was just an unbelievable force of nature there. But then in the weight room, we went to the weight room to work out together. I saw him curl 90-pound curls in each hand, okay, which is like ridiculous amount. The strength and conditioning coach, the strength and conditioning coach at the University of Virginia was the only other person on the campus who could curl 90 pounds. And this is one of the best football teams in the entire ACC and NCAA at the time, University of Virginia. None of their football players could do a 90-pound curl in either hand. So Ralph Sampson, as though he appeared very thin, he was really strong. He was an extremely strong person, and the strength was well hidden because it just didn't show. And so I think that you're going to run into that with Lively a little bit, but he needs to train. He needs to get after it. But I have him as too low. Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana. A lot of people in the mock draft say, take this guy over Trayce Jackson-Davis. And I'm sitting there wondering, what are they looking at? What are they using as observational tools? What are the metrics that they're applying to this? Because I love Trayce Jackson-Davis. He might come back to bite me in the ankle a little bit because of my enjoyment of his game. But his career in the Big Ten has been outstanding. He stayed around the extra year this year to try and get in and improve his draft position. And so I'd like to reward him for that. When I look at some of these other names on the list, I sit there and I go, wow, I don't know that you would take that gentleman over Trayce Jackson-Davis, because Trayce Jackson-Davis has so many qualities that are really, really good basketball qualities, okay? He's going to shoot the ball pretty good from the outside, but he's long, 6'10", and can dunk dunk anything around the basket. He runs the floor extremely well. He has this good intuition about basketball, which is not always teachable. He has a good feel for the game, and that's not always something that you can teach. And so that's why I'm a little bit higher on him. But again, these other names that I have, I would take Trace Jackson Davis over Jarace Walker any day of the week, twice on Sunday. This happens to be Thursday, so we're just only going to take them once. But honestly, when I look at things, when you look at the whole spectrum of what they've both produced, it's not even close. If you want to tell me that you are a crystal ball guy and you can prognosticate and look into the future and you see something that I don't see, okay, I'm willing to have that discussion with you, but I'm also willing to say, look at the numbers, because the numbers rarely lie. Dwayne Wade's numbers when he was at Marquette didn't lie. Okay, so we're moving, we're closing. This is, again, the fastest hour in all of basketball. This isn't a show, it's a fast break. And that's what I love about it, because when I sit down in this seat, boy, I look up at that, and Pete is so good to me that he has this big monster neon clock that sits right in front of me, so I can always kind of value the time and see what I got left and where I need to go and how I need to move there. So now we're going to go to the too low list. This group of gentlemen, I think people are sleeping on. All right, they haven't made the right picks. They haven't made the right assessments, and that's what makes the difference, are the assessments. The Denver Nuggets assessment on Jokic was ridiculous. He's one of the best NBA players in the game right now. I know he didn't get the MVP. I thought he should have gotten the MVP. We got a little bit of that into the TV world, and I thought that that's how they decided it. And I don't think that vote was a great vote. I thought Jokic really averaging a triple-double and not getting an MVP award, I don't know how that works. Now he goes on and wins the whole national title, kind of validating what I've been saying all along. I think he's the best player in the game. He impacts the game in ways that other people can't do it. So when you go and you say you found him, now you keep working as a draft person with all of these other people that are going and taking the people that I say, don't take them, don't take them. Those are 5, 6 spots where you can filter in some of these gentlemen and really possibly wind up with a sleeper, somebody who's a little bit better than people are saying. Okay, so here we go. Number 1, and we've talked about this young man a couple of times, Tristan Vukcevic. He is from Serbia. I really like his game. I'm not saying he's Doncic, or I'm not saying he's the Joker, but he's very similar, and he has a real good feel for the game. I don't think you're going to find him on that board, Pete.
Yeah, there he is right there, going 46 to Atlanta.
46 to Atlanta, at your peril, NBA. Leave him at the 46 board. I have him in the first round. I have him as a player that's better than Grady Dick without a question. I know he's an international player, a little bit tough to get a read on, but if Atlanta or anybody gets him in a 46 pick, I'd say you might have
your next Joker.
You might have a steal on your hands. That's exactly right. You might have the next Joker. And you don't actually, in your second pick, you don't need the next Joker. But this young man could come in the NBA and has a pretty good skill set. He's 6'11", 6'10", shoots the ball from the outside, and really has a good feel. Again, intuition for the game. I like that. Okay, Isaiah Wong, Miami Hurricanes. I've looked at all the guards that they have up there. You have, I would take Wong over Cason Wallace. I'm going to say it right now. I would take Wong over Cason Wallace. You have Marcus Sasser up on the board. I like him as well. But when you say Kendrick Price, Marquise Novell, if you think you can move Isaiah Wong to the point and have him be a serviceable point guard, I think you got yourselves a very deceptive athlete. You have yourselves what we refer to in the coaching business as a bucket. We have a guy who can score the basketball, and that's in the NBA kind of frame. But I think Isaiah Wong from the Miami Hurricanes, again, he took them to 2 Elite Eights in the NCAA, back-to-back. I mean, that matters. He led both of those teams there. I think people are sleeping on him. If you don't have him in the first round, you're crazy. Derek Lively, out of Duke. Some people don't even have him in the first round. He averaged over 4 block shots a game as a freshman. I see him having that one skill set which makes him applicable to the NBA game. He'll be able to change and block shots a little bit. Again, Derek Lively, another young man. If I'm going to be critical of Wembanyama and critical of Holmgren and some of these other players that don't seem and appear to have that NBA-ready body, unfortunately for you Duke fans, Derek Lively, with him, I also think it's just his metabolism and the way that he's grown. And I mean, he's 7'1". So putting all it all together and then saying, okay, we want to acquire strength, that's not always easy for somebody that's 7'1".
So, Coach, this mock draft has him at 15 going to Atlanta.
Yeah, good spot. I'd take him a little bit higher than that, maybe. I think that's actually that's right about where I think he should be. You know, but they have Grady Dick in front of him on that mock draft. And that's cray-cray to me, baby. Okay, Leonard Miller, very, very low on some people's drafts. Can you find him in that first round over there?
I'm looking for it right now.
Leonard Miller, G League Ignite, 6'11". He's big, strong, physical. I would probably draft him over Lively. Because of his physical abilities, a little bit stronger, a little bit more grown as a man than Lively. But I really like him. They don't have him in the first round.
Nope.
Yeah, that's crazy as well. Okay, Derek Lively belongs in the first round. You're talking Grady Dick, Brandon Podziemski, Jarace Walker. You got to be kidding me if you don't think Leonard Miller belongs in that conversation. Okay, Seth Lundy, I'm going to throw this name out. Celtics maybe in the 25th pick. It depends what you're looking for, Celtics. Now, if you're the Celtics and you're looking for a point guard, Marcus Sasser at 25 might be available to you. Cason Wallace, although I'm not a great fan of his, at Kentucky might be available to you. Marquise Novell would make Boston Garden a really, really exciting place. He's 5'8", stick of dynamite, and he can get up and down the floor. And one of the things that I think NBA people need to look at in their point guard selections, and I'll tell this to every general manager that's out there right now, in the current setup in the NBA, your point guard has to be a pick and roll master. Your point guard has to be able to run pick and roll. It's one of the reasons I like Wong, because they run a lot of pick and roll at Miami, and I think that it's indicative that you run pick and roll in the NBA. Marquise Novell, if you're pick and rolling with him and some of those Celtics players, I think you're going to have some excitement there. And again, he's 5'8". You're not going to light up anybody's world there, but he's tough as nails and he'll play hard every possession. So I think you could, they're talking about Pritchard as one of their point guards. They're talking about some other people. This guy's tough as nails. I'd throw him in there and give him a shot. As a rookie, you might struggle a little bit, so you might want to plug that with a veteran pickup here maybe in a trade. But I think you could take Kendrick Davis out of, he was originally at SMU, transferred to Memphis this year, led them to a very good year. I think the Celtics could take any of those guys and wind up with it.
Time for your 2-minute warning.
Thank you, Pete. The reason that I like Seth Lundy is because I think he's the best shooter in the draft right now. I think his ability to shoot the ball is something that's really, really, where do they have him?
44 going to San Antonio.
Nope. Got to get him up higher. If San Antonio was to draft Wembanyama and take Seth Lundy, I think you're getting people are a little soft on his athleticism, but his shooting ability, he was the best shooter in the combine. He has some of the best numbers of anybody out there, and he really, really, I think, when you leave him open, I mean, if you have to cover Jason Tatum, like if I was the Lakers, I'd take him, because you got to cover LeBron in a different kind of way. You got to cover Anthony Davis in a different kind of way. That's going to get people open. What happens when they're open? Go back to the Chicago Bulls model when they had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen tearing everybody up. Who was next to them? John Paxson and Steve Kerr, two of the greatest shooters of the basketball of all time. So those are my guys, Pete, that I really like to see move up a little bit tonight, but we're going to find out what the NBA people think tonight. I'm really excited about it, and excited to be back in the studio with all of you. The support that we've gotten for our show on social media and all the different places has been absolutely great. We love it. We love you, and stay with us because we're going to keep growing. We're going to keep getting better. As Pete said, we're going to get into the NBA draft next year in a different kind of way, and we also have the Las Vegas Summer League coming up, so we'll be excited about that. We'll see you next week in the Zone. Thanks again, my people.